Hey guys, and welcome to another model review with me. So, today we're talking about a warship from the Royal Navy that is famous for multiple reasons. Not only did she get the most battle honours in any warship in the Royal Navy during both World Wars, but she survived them both and had a very good reputation to go with her. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the Queen Elizabeth class battleship, HMS Warspite. Yes. Another ship that's actually survived and still stuck with me today. So before we get into the history and bits and pieces of HMS Warspite, guys, I must say this. Warspite is actually one of those ships which at first I knew very little about and didn't really, well, no, obviously don't hunt me for this. It's just a fact. I didn't know too much about her. At first, I was like, what's so big about this warship? She's not exactly the biggest and the most baddest, is she? I mean, nothing can compare to the Royal Navy's newest and top end warships. Well, this was obviously at a time before I actually started doing some proper studies about the Battle of Jutland and obviously the Dreadnought era as a whole. See, I knew about HMS Dreadnought, I knew about the Orions and the Iron Dukes and the first type of King George V. And I knew about obviously the newer King George V's, the Rodney and Nelson, and obviously Vanguard and a few other warships. But I never ever thought about what people were talking about when I was growing up, with especially with my granddad, because again he knew about Warspite, he knew about the Queen Elizabeths, and there were times I was like, well, wait a minute, isn't the Royal Oak a Queen Elizabeth? And that's when I found out, no, that's a Royal Sovereign class. It's interesting really, and obviously the very first time I saw the ship in the flesh, so to speak, was actually not in a book, but on a YouTube channel, and his name is the Mighty Jingles. If you know him, then that's good for you guys, but if you don't, then you don't. Point being, so the Mighty Jingles did a review and recommendation on the Warspite for World of Warships when she was first released on the PC version back in the day, and that's when I took a fancy to the ship, because I was like, ooh, I actually like her design. So that's a Queen Elizabeth class, so that's what that does. Ooh, she really has some serious punching power. Let's look up her history. Oh my god. What the hell? So let's talk a bit about Warspite, guys, when it comes to her history. And I say talk, stand by. This is a long one. HMS Warspite was a Queen Elizabeth class battleship. She was the second of the class to be built and had quite the reputation in World War I and World War II. She was ordered in 1912, the same year when ironically RMS Titanic was sunk. Warspite was laid down on October 31st, 1912, and launched on the 26th of November 1913. Nearly 2 years of refitting out and at Devonport Royal Navy Dockyards. Warspite was commissioned, and into the Royal Navy she went in 1916. Obviously 1916 is very important because that's when the Battle of Jutland happened. On the 31st, Jutland was in full swing, and Warspite and her sister Valiant and the Malaya, the Malaya were under fire by Admiral Hipper's battlecruiser squadron. Poor old Warspite would take multiple hits from SMS Von der Tann and have one of her turrets jam up. She'd also have one of her rudders jam up, so she was turning. And it took a while for them to get her back into full swing again. But while she was under fire, she did not take any serious damage to her engine or crucial compartments such as the magazine, which is more than what I can say about poor, invincible, indefatigable Queen Mary. Yeah, poor guys. They really got blown to pieces, didn't they? Anyway, the Battle of Jutland, she fought hard and fast, and she survived it. But she did take a serious beating, as I said before. This was her only major engagement that happened during World War I. However, in World War II, there are some things which I have now learned about, which I didn't know before. Warspite built a reputation from the start, not only in wartime, but she seemed to be interested in ramming her sisters. And she's also seemed to be interested in going her own path, so to speak. This will become more this would become more of a thing when her career ended after World War Two. She was in the fjords in Narvik during the beginning of the Narvik's invasion, and she would obliterate a couple of German destroyers. Her seaplane, which ironically I've got here as a Walrus itself, is responsible for destroying one of the submarines. I think it was the first submarine to be sunk during World War Two. But then obviously she would go on to do other major things. Not only would she escort convoys and obviously, keep certain ships at bay. Yeah, we're looking at you. Well, obviously Bismarck didn't get the chance, but we're looking at you, Tirpitz. We're looking at you, Scharnhorst-Gneisenau. We're looking at you, German cruisers. Yes. Don't try to mess with old Warspite. You'd find out very hard what would happen if you decided to go after a ship like this with those 15-inch guns. So Warspite was also there at Normandy. She was one of the first ships to open fire at the shoreline and help destroy German emplacements during the Battle of Normandy. And, war would end, but not before she would, basically, during Normandy, she would basically run her guns out, then she would have to go back to get them replaced, only to come back and start firing them again, then to go back and get them replaced once again. Apparently that's how it worked. I'm not entirely sure if that's correct or not, so I do apologise if that's an incorrection, guys, but it's from what I've heard. Anyway, war ended and Warspite would be retired. Now, it's a shame really, because it would have been awesome to see this ship as a museum ship. Now again, don't get me wrong, I do like HMS Belfast. I think she's an incredible ship of her own. She built up a reputation of her own, and no disrespect whatsoever. But if you had a ship that survived 2 world wars, she was still quite sturdy, although she was looking a bit long in the tooth. Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, again, the ship was commissioned and ordered and built between 1912 and 13 and then launched. And obviously this ship is well over 50 years, by the time they retired her. So she's definitely done her due. Anyway, the last bit of information for you guys is what I mentioned before, when she would basically go off on her own. So on her way to being towed to the scrapyard, she decided to basically break away from her lines and disappear for a little while. It took the guys a little while to find her again, but then they found her grounded off the Prussian cove, and she wouldn't budge. They tried everything to get Warspite off of the cove. Like I say, she just would not budge. They had to lighten her quite significantly in order to get her to get towed to scrap. So like I say, this ship really did build up a reputation of her own, and how really she deserves it. So the statistics of the class itself is very easy, guys. So we've got a standard displacement of 32,590 tons with a full displacement just a little over that. Deep load just after that, which was 33,790 tons. These ships could go 24 knots. For the time they were built, that is very fast. But this was produced by 24 Yarra boilers, and they could make up to 75,000 shaft horsepower, or 56,000 kilowatts of power. The length of the Queen Elizabeth's was 643 feet 9 inches long, or 176.2 metres. The beam was 90 feet 7 inches long in the beam, or 27.6 metres. And the draft was 33 feet 10.1 metres. As I mentioned, her main armament consisted of 8 15-inch guns, but she also had a secondary gun armament. Now, I've got Warspite in her World War II configuration. This is not how they looked during their World War I configuration. In World War I, they had a smaller superstructure. They had 2 smokestacks and a bunch of other things, which I cannot remember off the top of my head, guys, so I do apologise for that. But I can give you the details in the armament. So originally, she was armed with 14 6-inch guns, 152mm. These would be encasements mounted along the side. As you can see, during World War II, Warspite would maintain a couple of these, but a good portion would be replaced by the 4.7 inch, I do believe. Again, guys, you have to forgive me for that. Obviously, the anti-aircraft guns would get upped by a lot, so she'd have a lot of pom-poms all over the place, orlicans in place, and all those. The guns that would keep fighters and aircraft at bay, but, well, I wouldn't put her up against a Japanese aircraft carrier or the German Luftwaffe if it was going to come out in full force. It definitely would hurt. Anyway, she would also carry 2 single 3-inch guns. These are semi-6mm. They would be for the anti-aircraft guns in World War One. And believe it or not, Warspite would also carry 4 21-inch torpedo tubes. She'd have one mounted in the bow, one mounted in the stern, and obviously 2 more, one on each side. So this was a very formidable battleship in her time. So yes, the model kit. She's 1350, as you could probably tell already, guys. This is an Academy model kit. Now, although I wasn't happy with my Bismarck model from Academy when I first built that one, that doesn't mean I wasn't going to give Academy another chance or two. And they've definitely given me reason to go, right, okay, I know they have some good kits and they have some bad kits. Warspite is a good kit. Now, she doesn't come with a lot of photo etch parts, guys, so if you're looking for extra details and bits and pieces, I would go with the Trumpeter one, which is the original one I was going for. Unfortunately, when I was moving at the time, because I recall when I was building Warspite, it was just prior to COVID, it was just prior to when the flat I'm living in was having a refit. That model did not survive the move. She was crushed, basically, and this one is her replacement, the Academy version. So, all the detail is there, everything went together pretty well with the model. The only things that were extra is the wooden deck and the cranes and obviously the photo etch railings. Once again, Ed Card is the guy who I brought, well, I'll say the guy, it's the company I brought the railings and the cranes from. It did come with a bunch of other bits and pieces, guys, but I really didn't want to do too much because obviously I had the detail I wanted. She was giving off enough of her, enough of her characteristics as it was, and I was very happy with how the build was, so I thought, you know what, let's do what needs to be done, but leave the rest because, you know, less is more, and that's what I was looking for when I was doing a review the other time. Do I recommend, obviously, obviously do recommend them. You can get the Warspite in her World War One configuration, but Trumpeter, I've only done it in 1/700 scale, guys. I know there's a couple of people that have done a 3D model print of Warspite in a World War One configuration, but it's extremely expensive. So unless you really, really want it, or you're really, really after it, and you're able to spend the money on it, go for it. But otherwise, get yourself the Academy one. I remember this not being too expensive. I don't think it's expensive today. I remember paying about 35, maybe 40 quid for Warspite, with an extra 15 on top of that for the photo etch bit. So yeah, I wouldn't say it was too expensive, and obviously I was very happy with what I got out of it. So there you go. Paint job on Warspite. Now originally I was going to try and do a Royal Navy Grey, but this was one of those ships that suffered from the lack of Royal Navy Grey, and obviously once again COVID was about, so getting paint was like trying to get gold out of a museum. It just wasn't going to work. So I decided to do a sort of, what would she look like if she was tired? And ironically, this is one of those very few ships I actually did a camouflage pattern on, guys. This is not an accurate camouflage pattern for anyone who is wondering, but I wanted to do a bit of blue and a bit of green in there, you know, just to give her a bit of a Barry. Just to give her a bit of a Barry look to her, and I'm very happy with how she came out. You know, she's gorgeous, absolutely stunning. As it stands, Warspite is the pride of my Royal Navy. That is until I get myself a model of HMS Hood. This is not going to be the last Royal Navy warship I will be producing in the foreseeable future, guys. I have got plans for a few others, including the newer HMS Royal Oak, because I do like the cheaper versions of the Queen Elizabeth class. They still have characteristics to them, they still have style, and obviously they outlived the war in their own special way. So that's basically it for this one then, guys. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this model review. I will see you all in the next one. In the meantime, have a nice weekend, Look after yourselves and take care. Ta-ta for now.